Welcome, everybody, to the Beards and Bible podcast. It has been far too long since we've sat down and recorded, but we're back. We're back, baby!
Yeah. Let's see, you were on vacation,
I was on vacation.
and then I had a baby. Well, I had a baby last episode too, though, but
That's true. You had two babies?
no. But I mean, I'm in the...
You're just popping babies out left and right.
Yeah. There was one in there we just forgot. There's actually twins.
Oh, yeah.
No, but yeah, we've been busy. Where'd you go on vacation?
Well, I mean, it was...
Was it a staycation?
It was a vacation. My dad, they rented a house in the mountains of North Carolina, and so we went just for a few days to hang out with them. So yeah, it was needed. It was super, super needed, and it was good. We really enjoyed it. I turned my phone off for like 4 solid days.
Really?
So 4 solid days, my phone was off.
Wow. Did you tell people in advance that's what you're doing?
I did. I told everybody from church, hey, if it's an emergency, call Jenny. She's got her phone. But I need to disconnect because I feel like I am addicted to checking my email and checking all of my chats, and it's really hard for me to disconnect. And so I just had to
Disconnect.
cut it out. You
You had to go dark.
I had to go dark, and it was felt like I was missing an appendage, but it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever done that?
Not intentionally, no. I have just because I've lost my phone for.
Yes. I
But
think
no,
you've
I've
had
never
to text
gone.
me from your wife's phone because you lost your phone.
Yeah. I remember one time I put my phone on the back bumper of my car. I was doing something, and I just
Going
drove
dark
off and
on
never
purpose.
found it with days and days, and I still haven't. This is back before you could have like find my phone things, but no, I've never gone like full like Jimmy Hoffa or anything. Anybody like you apparently have. So
Yeah, my problem is I'm a control freak, and I like to be in the know on everything.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm not saying. I know it. I'm just saying.
you're like, oh yeah,
that can happen
that
to me
sounds
as
like
well
you.
sometimes. I have a tendency for that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so like even if I can't do anything about an email from church or anything about a group text somebody sends,
Yeah.
I don't know. I like to be in the know. I like to be kind of on top of things, and so when it's time for me to disconnect, when it's time for me to get out of town, unless I do something that drastic, I just won't. Like the temptation is just to check my email every few minutes and check my text, and yeah, it's no bueno. So, but yeah, it was good, man. It was good. I'm really trying to learn how to rest, and I really needed it because it's been a really full and challenging 6 months of ministry, and so I feel like God's been really good to us, and we're kind of entering into a season of slowing down a little bit. So I'm happy about that. So
Good. Yeah.
yeah. How are things at your church?
Good. Gearing up for fall holy days. We're doing Feast of Tabernacles. So this year we have like a whole designated team set apart. Just they're going to be planning that whole event. It's a big event where we all camp out together, as many people want to, and yeah, we just have a week long, kind of like almost like spiritual emphasis kind of week where we have nightly Bible studies and worship, and we all eat dinner together every night. So some people just get off work and they come and they spend the evening there. Some people actually come and they actually spend the night there. So you're around the same people a lot. So it can be a blessing and a curse, but it's usually most times it's a lot of fun, and it's an awesome experience. So we do Feast of Tabernacles 2024 is coming up, and our theme is going to be, we usually have like a theme, overarching theme is going to be dwelling in unity. So we're excited about that. Yeah.
What is the song? I'm gonna miss this.
Hine Matov.
Hine Matov.
Umanayim.
Imanayim.
Shevet Achim Gam Yam Kad.
Is there a song?
Yeah.
Matov.
Yeah. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell in unity. Yeah.
Good. See, I know.
Look at your Hebrew.
I know. Look at I've been studying.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is really random. My mom is a counselor, and she works for these like remote mobile counseling websites, and she had a
Yeah.
client years ago that grew up in the Orthodox community in New York City,
Interesting.
and he wrote a book. He's no longer in the Orthodox community anymore, or else he wouldn't have hired a goy as his counselor. But anyway,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. True.
as a gift to my mom, he gave her a book he had written about all of the Psalms.
Huh.
And so in my Bible reading plan, I have a psalm, usually a day, and then there's this book that he wrote. And so it's really cool just to get like the Jewish perspective
Yeah.
on like how an Orthodox Jew would view that psalm. Because from a
Hmm.
Christian perspective, we read it and we're like, oh yeah, yeah. And then you read it, okay, so what would a Jewish person see in this psalm
Hmm.
that maybe I would not see in this psalm? And it's super interesting, man.
Yeah, sounds like it. What was the name of the book? Do you know?
I think it's called From Our Mouth to God's Ears or something. I'll have
Hmm.
to take a picture and send it to you.
Yeah.
The guy's name is Reuben Ephraim, I think. Maybe I just smashed together two Jewish sounding names.
Yeah. Moshe Yosef. Yeah.
Moshe Steinstein.
Hmm.
Let's see. I think it's called From Our Lips to
Yeah.
God's Ears, which is like a Yiddish phrase. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Reuben
I-
Ibrahimoff?
Ibrahimov. Yeah. Interesting. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Um, sounds
Yeah.
really fascinating.
Yeah, he published it back in 2016. So,
Hmm. Yeah, in our biblical Hebrew class I teach every Saturday morning, we're going through the Psalms just verse by verse, like just word by word, and reading it in Hebrew, talking about what the word is, what it's translated to. We just got through the first of Psalm 1, and we went through that just like I said, word for word. It took us about 6 weeks to get through it. But talk about like an in-depth study, like we've been digging
yeah.
in deep to it. So yeah, we're just gonna keep doing that all the way through uh, the Psalms as far as we can go.
Wow, man. So when you get into the Hebrew and you get into the Hebrew words,
Mm-hmm.
there's wordplay going on, right? I mean, with Psalm
Yeah,
119,
yeah, yeah. That's a big one.
yeah, Psalm 119 is every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet that you walk
Mm-hmm.
through.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. And
yeah,
so
like
obviously there's things we missed in the English translation. I'm sure probably there in the original Hebrew.
yeah, totally. Like Psalm 1, there's a lot of cool, like when it says that the righteous man meditates on his law day and night. It uses
Mm-hmm.
the word verb for haggah. It literally means it's a cattle term. It means to chew your cud. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. So when it says that he meditates on your word day and night, it's invoking in the reader's mind the idea of a cow regurgitating something and chewing it more and then swallowing and regurgitating. So
Hmm.
just things like that, it's like if the translators put in there, he regurgitates and swallows and regurgitates his word day and night, it doesn't really have the same
It's
ring, but
not really
meditate, the
flowing.
idea of
Yeah.
meditating, it just makes complete sense then because you're like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it means you forget about it, comes back up, forget about it, comes back up. It's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
That is super cool.
That's just one of many instances when you actually, really dig in the original language, you kind of have this better, kind of more physical, tactile kind of
Mm-hmm.
idea what the psalmist is saying.
So I talked through First Samuel
Mm-hmm.
uh, last year and the beginning of this year, and it was really interesting. Some of the words that the translators, like one word I thought was super interesting was in First Samuel. There's always these really interesting incidents of like, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul and he began to prophesy.
Mm.
And so then the
Interesting.
saying went out, is Saul among the prophets?
Mm.
And so the word for prophesy is a really interesting one in the Hebrew because it's the word, I think it's nabah is the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it could mean any number of things. Like when we think prophecy, we think it means a foretelling of future, but according
Mm-hmm.
to like, when I studied that word nabah, because I had to, because it was like there were certain incidents where, okay, all these guys were coming with all these instruments and they were prophesying with all these instruments. And I was like, how do you prophesy with an instrument?
Mm.
But
Yeah.
it was too under the influence of the Spirit of the Lord. basically speak truth or worship, or it's very like it's a nuanced word that's just packed full of so many different meanings. But our word prophecy is basically is that's the best we can do in the English language.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's almost like a holy state of ecstasy or something like a
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Which I
It's
think there's a
interesting.
lot of modern rational minded Christians that get super uncomfortable with that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, myself included. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's all these incidents of Naba only happening when a prophet of God says, "Hey, bring me a musician and let him play." And then after the musician plays, then the prophet Nabas. It's like, what? So you had to have a soundtrack for that to happen? Like,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting.
So I think that there is so much that we miss sometimes in our rational, Western, tidy, neat little boxes.
Hmm.
Um, just about the depth and the beauty of Scripture,
Hmm.
especially from
Yeah.
an Old Testament standpoint. So,
Hmm. Well, a lot has happened since the last time we talked. I feel like
yes, it has.
we wake up every morning and it's like, what page of the history book will be written today? Things are just flying at us like crazy. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Speaking of flying at us like crazy,
Hmm.
was that a segue? Is that appropriate? Is that too
Yeah.
soon?
Is it too soon?
I don't know. Yeah.
That
Um,
was a zinger.
that.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. So the Trump assassination attempt on July
Hmm.
13th. That's a thing.
Yeah.
Did
That
you ever
is.
think that we would be having this conversation at the beginning of the year when you thought about how the year would unfold?
I. I'm not just tooting my own horn, but I actually thought it was a pretty reasonable chance that that would happen.
Hmm.
Um,
Why?
yeah. Just because of how divided and polarized our nation is politically speaking right now. That
Yeah.
I thought that there'd probably be some kind of political violence, and in particular against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
just a very, I mean, I guess he's divisive. I mean,
Yep.
and I'm not saying that in a negative way per se, but
He's
you
polarizing.
you either hate the man to death or
Hmm.
you think he is just awesome sauce.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the kind of people who unfortunately get shots fired at them. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. 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 So if you're living under a rock, which I don't think you are, um, July 13th, Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt while he was addressing a crowd at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. The supposed, I guess we could say he's confirmed as the suspect, but again, there's a they're still using words like the alleged shooter, but
Mm-hmm.
um, Thomas Matthew Crooks is who seems to be the shooter, a 20-year-old man from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Which, if the only picture they have of him, they keep showing in the news, he looks like he's 12. Have you noticed that? It's like,
Yeah. And he
yeah,
has the muscle mass of like a 12-year-old ballerina.
yeah,
It's like
like not who
bizarre.
you would have expected at all.
No,
Yeah. So apparently he uh, borrowed his father's AR-15, fired 8 rounds from the AR-15 from the roof of a building, 400 to 450 feet from the stage, and Trump was shot and wounded in the right ear. One audience member was killed. Corey, I'm trying to remember his last name. I have to look that up. 50 years old, and he was like, I guess, shielding his wife and children, which is
mm,
really sad. Um, 2 other audience members were critically injured, and then Crooks was shot and killed by the Secret Service counter sniper team. Um, Here's what has made it so crazy, and like everything that follows. There has been so much. I don't want to say subversiveness on the part of the Secret Service, but like not a lot of answers given, not a lot of um, So the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, well, was subpoenaed into a congressional hearing. And I don't know if you got to watch any of those clips, Gabe, of that
Yeah.
congressional hearing.
Yeah. Some.
That was wacky, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Man, it was like she couldn't answer any question that was asked of her. She was just sidestepping them all, like she had
Yeah.
something to hide.
Yeah. Yeah. It's bizarre. It did not help things. I'll put it that way.
No,
Like you probably were watching and you're thinking you already had suspicions that there's something fishy was going on, and then you watch it and
right?
you're like, oh man, this just confirms everything. It's
Yeah,
bizarre.
like I don't want to believe a conspiracy theory, but this is making it really hard to not believe conspiracy theories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like all sorts of stuff. Like why weren't there Secret Service agents on the roof? And she said the
Mm-hmm.
pitch of the roof was dangerous. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's all these like reports that they spotted the shooter long before he got on the roof because he was hanging out with a rangefinder and all this stuff, and people were letting Secret Service know that he was there, and yet they still allowed Donald Trump to go out on the stage even after they were aware that there was a threat. I mean, it was just craziness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so after her congressional testimony that just basically made everybody go, "Holy cow, this looks like an inside job or something,"
Mm-hmm.
she resigned. So a little bit like Lee Harvey Oswald getting shot by Jack Ruby. I mean, that's kind of how it feels. But I don't know, man. This is crazy. Like, what in the world? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So one good thing that did come out of it is Joe Biden condemned the violence, called for a reduction in heated political rhetoric. Um, he emphasized the importance of resolving political differences peacefully, and for about a week, it kind of seemed like, hey,
Yeah.
let's put a little love in our hearts, right? But like everything else that has come out since then, man, it just the whole case is so nutty because we still don't have a motive.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think everybody wanted to rush to whatever narrative they already had solidified in their head
Mm-hmm.
that this was, like a Donald Trump hater that was all leftist, progressive, whatever. But he was a registered Republican. And then those on the left that had said things like, this was all a setup by the Trump campaign, and maybe he did this to try to, make Trump into a martyr because he was a right wing MAGA guy or whatever. Well, he donated to a voter turnout group on a Democratic platform in January 2021. So, um,
Hmm.
what do you do with that? He's registered
Yeah.
Republican. He donates to Democrat fundraising. No clue. Like what in the
Yeah.
world?
And apparently has no social media
Yeah.
history or any kind of interactions with anyone on the internet ever.
Yep.
Yeah, the whole thing just doesn't make sense. Um,
No, it doesn't.
and it's like you mentioned, like Joe Biden calling for decrease in polarizing political rhetoric and dividing, but that has not stopped. Like that's
Mm-mm.
continued on both sides. You hear Trump saying that Kamala Harris is going to be the end of democracy as we know it, and then you hear
Right.
vice versa, and it's like
Yeah.
comparing people. Both sides are comparing people to fascists or the Third Reich, or I've heard people compare Trump to Hitler, and it's like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, man, it's so heated.
Yeah. And Tenacious D, Jack Black, and Kyle Gass. You know Tenacious D, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The night after the Trump assassination attempt, they were on stage in Australia, and they brought out Kyle Gass, uh, the other member of Tenacious D, besides Jack Black, a birthday cake, and they said, "Blow out your candles and make a wish." And he said something to the extent, "What'd you wish for?" He said that next time they wouldn't miss Trump.
wow.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
yeah, stuff like that. It's just kind of like, man, we've kind of this is like what's at stake when we just continue to just up the ante further and further, and say the craziest, most bombastic things ever without thinking about like there's going to be some severely confused, lonely young man somewhere that's going to hear these things and see this as a call to action in his own
Yeah.
twisted way. There's always been weird young men like this. Um, so yeah. Where were you when you heard the news, and what was your first reaction?
I was just in my living room. We just turned on the news, turned on TV, or someone texted us saying, "You need to turn the news on," and we did, and yeah, it was pretty wild. We watched it,
Hmm.
just minutes after it kind of happened and was playing out, and so we just kind of glued ourselves to it. And as they were getting more and more information, it was like, man, this is crazy
Yeah.
that we're just kind of witnessing history. This is, I think, the last assassination attempt was 81, so
Hmm.
not in my lifetime have I seen a U.S. president almost assassinated.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy. What about you?
Yeah. I was at church, and I had just gotten done preaching our first Saturday night service, and I was downstairs eating between services before getting ready to preach the second service.
Mm.
And somebody pulled up a phone and showed the video. And at the time, I mean, it was like everything was kind of developing in real time. I mean, nobody knew if Trump got shot. They knew shots had been fired, and they knew Secret
Mm.
Service had swarmed him and taken him off stage, but nobody knew, did he actually get hit? Did he not get hit? Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I think I was teaching in Second Corinthians, and I had written something in my sermon about like how the way of Christ and meekness and gentleness and being Christ-like,
Mm.
uh, that's seen as a sign of weakness in our world because our world is just obsessed with vulgar displays of power and revenge and retaliation.
Mm-hmm.
So the next morning, I got to get up and preach that same sermon, basically calling our folks to be Christ-like in the face of
Mm.
something like that. So I think that was God's providence in that we were in that passage of scripture. But
Mm.
yeah, but this didn't surprise you. I mean, you said
Mm-mm.
earlier you kind of saw it was coming from a mile away.
Yeah, and obviously I don't want this to happen, but I would not be surprised if someone makes another attempt.
Hmm.
Yeah,
On either one,
on
Kamala
either
Harris.
one. Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah,
like you have to be in the United States of America to really understand, but our political atmosphere is so tense and so divided right now
yeah.
that anything could happen. I don't obviously I condemn political violence in any shape and form, but um, yeah, it's just sad to see.
I mean, you weren't expecting it to be this murky and this confusing, were you? I don't think anybody was. Or were
I
you? I
don't
mean,
know. I mean,
if you think about the assassination attempts, okay, so
mm-hmm,
1981, John Hinckley Jr.,
mm-hmm,
he believed that he was the character, Robert De Niro's character from Taxi Driver. He was obsessed with the movie Taxi Driver.
yeah,
And he had some twisted thought in his head that if he shot the US president, then somehow Jodie Foster would fall in love with him because Jodie Foster was also in the movie Taxi Driver.
mm-hmm, yeah.
So
So he was just like mentally ill. Like, he was just
yeah,
delusional.
yeah.
Pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
When it comes to this character, it's like we can't pinpoint a motive.
Right.
We have no idea how he made it onto that roof and how he was completely overlooked. And why
Yeah.
was there like a random ladder leaning up against the wall of this building to allow him to do that? Why weren't there, so like there's all these questions swirling around and we can't really get closure on it. And then it suddenly leads like a lot of people to believe that this was orchestrated by the opposition to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's interesting about this is like true or not true, like most, I would say, I would go on a limb and say most um, ardent Trump supporters believe that this was to a certain extent orchestrated by Trump's opposition, that this was a conspiracy. Would you say that
Yeah.
most, and I would say
I think so.
50,
I think
I
that's
think
fair. Yeah.
50% of Trump supporters firmly believe that this was a conspiracy against Trump.
Yeah, I think so.
So,
Yeah.
regardless of if that's true, regardless, if 50% of 50% of the nation believes that,
Hmm.
that's uh that's not good. You know what I'm saying?
No, 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 no.
Okay, so I was watching the Republican National Convention, and something that really stood out to me was when Hulk Hogan got up there, and he's
Hmm.
whipping everybody up into this frenzy, right? And he's like yelling, he's like, "Man, you can't take my guy down," all this stuff. And he said this phrase. He says, "They tried to kill him."
Who was they?
Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
the crowd is cheering, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, here's Hulk Hogan, and all these other speakers that are up there. They're perpetuating this idea that this was a conspiracy, a bigger conspiracy than just one lone lunatic up there trying to shoot Trump.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like everyone's already kind of bought that bill of goods.
Right.
And I'm just thinking further down, as this train gets further down the tracks, if Trump loses, that might not bode well for our nation because of
Mm.
how many people believe that this was an insight, especially if there's some kind of
Yeah.
like shenanigans going on with the election.
Yeah.
Or, God forbid, if someone were to be successful at an assassination attempt,
Mm.
that would definitely not bode well for our nation
Well,
in
I
terms
was
of its
thinking
unity.
this is how. I mean, like that bullet was
Mm-hmm.
centimeters away from going into his temple and going straight through his head and killing him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, if you go back and watch, I mean, you can see from some of the still photographs the bullet. I mean, this photographers captured the bullet. I mean, like
Yeah.
he came close to getting his head blown off. I mean,
Oh
truly,
yeah.
if that happened,
Mm-hmm.
we were as a nation. I mean, a couple of centimeters away from a civil war.
Yeah. Yeah.
That could
At
have been
at
like the
best,
yeah, like
like
the
no, no.
assassination.
At best, there would have been rampant civil unrest.
Right, right,
At worst, a full-on civil war
yeah,
if he
like
had not turned his head at that minute, that
the
second.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated to kick
Mm-hmm.
off World War One.
Yeah.
Now, how did that? How was that rational? How was it? It probably wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't need rationality because you had so much polarization amongst
Mm-hmm.
these nations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You had nations that were chomping at the bits, hating one another, foaming at the mouth, and all you needed was just a little spark to set off the powder keg. We have been foaming at the mouth against each other for coming up on at least 10, maybe even longer than that, years.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that spark almost hit the fuse of the powder keg and blew
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that's what's concerning is, man, like we're not out of the woods yet with this, right?
Yeah. No, we're not. Well, just think about, like, statistically speaking, what are the odds that Trump would be speaking in this town, which was very close to this other guy's hometown, which wanted to kill him, who wanted to
Mm-hmm.
kill him? Okay, so what are the odds that that happened? And it happened at a place where there was a building that was, for the most part, unguarded. And what are the odds that that unguarded rooftop had a ladder propped up against it?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the odds that this guy was able to get up there and he was completely undetected? And
Yeah.
then what are the odds that all that happened and then he took a shot? And what are the mathematical odds that as he took that shot that was going straight towards his cranium, he turns at the very last second and
Right.
it just clips his ear? Like, I want to know what all those mathematical odds are stacked up on top of each other. It's crazy.
I think as people of faith, I have to come to a point where I say, I think God gave America a stay of execution and
Mm,
is giving us time to repent and
yeah.
calm down and go, hey, we probably need to like just tune it down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not
But
sure we're getting the message,
that's what a lot of Christians will use to say that Donald Trump is some sort of messianic figure,
Right.
like the Lord's
Right.
anointed.
Well,
And
yeah.
that's where I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's. I think God has a plan for him as much as like God had a plan for Balaam's ass. But
Yeah,
let's not go so far to say that he's some sort of like almost
untouchable.
semi divine
Right.
is the savior of our country because God preserved his life.
Yeah.
He's not going to save our nation. Like
No.
repenting and turning back to the Lord will save our nation. He's not going to do it.
So what do you do
We
with
have to do it.
the person that is well meaning that comes into your church and says, Pastor
Hmm.
Gabe, this is a
Yeah.
clear sign. God is on, you know, Trump is God's man. God's on his side. You know, this is the sign. I mean,
So no, yeah, I've had people ask that question, and it's like
I
they've
have
actually seen
too.
people. I've seen people say that because it hit his ear and there was blood on his ear, that it was like a fulfillment of when the high priest had to have blood put on their ear and their
Oh
toe and their big toe
gosh.
and all this stuff. And it's
Oh
like, dude,
no.
chill, pump the brakes on this because the claims that
Golly.
you're in effect calling Trump
The high
as some
priest.
sort of priest of God. Like, let's
Then
slow
that
this
would
down.
also make him probably the Antichrist. So like
Right. Yeah. I mean, which I could even say the Antichrist, according to the Bible, suffers
is
a
yep.
wound to his head and then comes back. Like,
Oh,
okay, we got to
oh,
play that both sides. But here's the
yep.
thing: if I, I want to say to those people, what if I told you there was a political leader who had no less than 42 failed attempts on his life and he survived them all? Would you say that God has his hands on that leader and is protecting him and is anointed by God? Yeah, I would. Okay, that person is none other than Adolf Hitler. Had no less than 42 attempts on his life.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler, obviously, but I'm
Right.
saying we can't jump to these kinds of conclusions
Right.
just because someone had a close call with close brush
Sure.
with death. Um, but yeah, I like your answer that maybe God was just giving us time to get our act together and repent.
Yeah.
Um, and he was like, "Ooh, I'm going to steer that bullet, or I'm going to have him turn his head
Hmm.
because people are praying for the United States of America to not
Yeah.
fall into civil war."
I mean, to be honest with you, I was that night. I think I was so overwhelmed with just the prospects of what could have been
Mm-hmm.
had that bullet been closer to his head. Like, what would it have been like waking up on a Sunday morning,
Yeah,
going to stand before my congregation? What would I have told them?
it's overwhelming to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, what do you do with that? What do you know? Um,
Yeah.
just how close that we came to something even worse. I mean, this was awful, right? Somebody lost their life. Two people were shot. Um, two people lost their life. This very confused young man lost his life. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh, yeah, I think more than anything, though, like we as Christians have to be, like you said, sober minded about it and say, okay, there is a sovereign God in heaven, and He has a providential hand, and He has plans for all things. And it was part of His plan for Donald Trump's life to be spared.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is that it was part of God's plan for Donald Trump's life to be spared.
Yeah.
It it
It
was
could
part
be
of
that.
God's plan for Hitler to survive 42 assassination attempts. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that he's some sort of messianic figure, you
And
know.
I did watch the RNC, and when Trump came out,
Yeah, I
that
did too.
first night or two of the RNC, he looked like a different man to me.
Yeah, me too.
His demeanor was radically different. He looked
Mhm.
like he had just almost died. I mean, he looked
Yeah,
like he almost had a bullet go into his brain, and you could
right.
tell that he had a deeper appreciation for his life and where he is at. He seemed like a broken and humble man.
Yeah,
Whether or not that sticks, I don't know. But maybe
yeah,
God was working in that area of his life with pride and saying, "Look, your life is in my hands.
yeah,
Your life is just a vapor." So
yeah. Hey,
yeah,
two questions
yeah.
for that. Number one, do you think something's fishy is going on surrounding the attempt? That's the first question. And the second is, what do you think the
Hmm.
after term is this of this is going to be long term? The
something
aftermath of this is
fishy.
going to be long term.
Yeah, I definitely think something fishy was going on with it.
Okay.
What, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to jump to conclusions on it, but definitely something fishy was going on.
Okay.
Whether it was like a sin of omission or, they were just like, hey, let's just kind of be laxed and see what happens. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they were actively involved in poking and prodding this man to want to do this and then opening up the door for him to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and I don't want to speculate. I don't know if we'll ever know,
Right. Right.
but
That
I
drives
wouldn't
some
put it
people
past some of these
listening
people.
crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the internet loves to fill in gaps when there's
Right.
unknowns. We
Right.
don't
Right.
like mystery. We don't like nuance. We love answers. And
Yeah.
even if that means we just make up answers,
But
that's
I
good
would
for us.
I would go so far to say that the whole COVID thing. I think one of the, if it wasn't one of the major intentions of those who started COVID, however that
Mhm,
started,
mhm.
it was probably definitely to remove Trump from office and to make him look really bad. It was definitely one of the, um, hey, if that happens that way, that's fine too. So,
Right.
to make him look like he mismanaged his whole pandemic.
Mhm.
And let me reiterate, like I'm not a diehard Trump fan, but I think there's a lot of people that just really strongly dislike him, and will
Yeah.
go to great lengths to try to keep him from getting into office again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting.
I'm with you. I don't know
Hmm.
what, but something about this seems really, really off.
Yeah.
Especially when I watched the congressional hearing of the Secret Service director. That
Yeah.
was,
Cheadle. Yeah.
yeah, man, that made my jaw drop up. And I was like, are you
Hmm.
kidding me? Like, why won't she give him a straight answer? And then she resigned.
Hmm.
And it's like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Um, something seems off, right? And like, let me just put a caveat to that. I have a dear, dear friend who works for the Secret Service. Great friend of mine. I've known him for years. Him and I text all the time. I texted him the night of, just say, hey man, I'm praying for you guys. Um, there are men and women that are putting their life on the line every day for the Secret Service that are doing a incredible job serving their country. So I don't ever want to denigrate those guys and gals and say, hey, like they're all in on something fishy, right?
Yeah.
If something fishy is happening, which I sure hope it isn't or didn't, but if something fishy is happening, it is not those guys and gals that are boots on the ground. It's the powers that be
Hmm.
that either, like you said, omitted something or intentionally or looked the other way or, God forbid, even orchestrated something. Um, yeah. So I feel like that's an important caveat to make sure that,
Yeah.
yeah. What about the aftermath long term?
I don't know. The aftermath long term, it's like, I think that this, in some people and many, if not most, Trump supporters' minds, galvanized their belief that there is a deep state out to end
Yeah.
Trump
Yeah.
and to destroy this nation. True or not,
Mm-hmm.
that is their truth. That is their reality. Um, I'm amazed to say this, but I think it's what I've seen on the news the past couple weeks is not helping their case.
Right. 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 Yeah.
I am not a conspiracy theorist. You can ask Stacy anytime a conspiracy theory comes across
Same. Same for
me.
me.
I'm always the biggest skeptic that stuff, but
Yeah.
this is almost like, man, you're almost trying to make it
Yeah.
obvious. But yeah, I think it's just going to galvanize that belief in some people's minds that this is a deep state thing. Like I said, that will not bode well if A, he loses the election and there's shenanigans going on with the election, or
Yeah.
B, someone is successful in ending his life. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm in agreement with you. I think this just is one more bullet in the gun of people who have those deep
Hmm.
state um, beliefs. And, like you said, it's as much as I want to not believe in conspiracy theories, it's really hard when you watch a congressional hearing and somebody is essentially dodging every answer and not,
Hmm.
and you're going, well, wait a second. if this is just like a black and white, open and shut, this or that, why don't you just tell us the truth? Why don't you just tell us what
Mm-hmm.
you know, right? But you're not, and so it kind of seems like there's things you're trying to hide or there's things you're trying to cover up, and so I think just here's the word: the distrust for the existing state of affairs in the federal government
Mm-hmm.
is at an all-time high because of crap like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the aftermath of this long term is that distrust just went through the roof.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you have rampant distrust of both the federal government and the election process, when you lose
Mm-hmm.
faith in a fair elections, then I don't know if you can turn that ship around.
Right.
You know
I
what I'm
mean, look
saying?
what's happening in Venezuela right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, the decay of the moral fabric that holds our country together. Um,
Yeah.
that's happening as well. So, yeah, you look at when Trump raised his fist and he's surrounded by the Secret Service and his blood streaming down his face, and he says, "Fight, fight, fight," and everyone starts chanting "USA, USA." And it gave me
Mm-hmm.
chills. I was like, "Wow, that was an incredible moment that I just watched on TV." And I looked at Stacey and I said, he either just sealed the election for himself and just won the election, or he secured a future civil war for us.
Right. Right.
In
Right. Yeah.
that moment right there, it was either
Yeah.
he won the election, or there's going to be some hard times ahead for our nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still kind of in denial about that, I guess. Like, I haven't done anything to really prepare, or I think I've just been kind of harking more as I get up and teach in our congregation, just telling people don't allow yourself to get emotionally bought into this.
Yeah.
Stay sober minded. Can you imagine being a good Christ following pastor during the Civil War? How
Oh
difficult that would
gosh,
be.
man. Especially in the South.
Yeah.
I mean, here in Tennessee, um, there were whole communities in parts of Tennessee that were against secession,
Mm,
and basically we're like, no, we're staying in the Union because the Confederacy is a rebellion, and that's wrong. We don't agree with it. It's built on
mm,
this unbiblical belief that it's okay to own slaves, and none of us own slaves, even though it's legal here in Tennessee. We don't own slaves because that's wrong. And
mm,
and then you had some churches that are like, no, this is God's will for us to be our own sovereign nation. And
mm.
yeah, I
Be
don't.
interesting to go back and read a lot of the sermons if they were written down during that
Yeah,
time period, from great pastors and leaders in the
yeah, I don't
nation at the
know,
time.
man. I would love to really dig into that. I know that there was a work of history. Um, so where I grew up in Dalton, Georgia, that was where the Confederate Army wintered right before Sherman's march to the sea. So basically,
Mm,
that drive from Chattanooga to Savannah was kind of put on pause during the winter of
mm,
1864, I think.
mm,
And during that winter, um, there were like revivals in the camp
mm,
near Mill Creek in North Georgia, where basically all of these men kind of knew, like, hey, we're when this weather warms up and the Union Army starts pushing us down to Savannah, a lot of us are probably going to die. We need to get right with God.
mm,
And so, yeah, I would love to know like the stories behind who those ministers were that served and
mm.
ministered to those soldiers, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a digression.
Mm.
So, speaking of something else
Mm.
related to the disintegration of Western civilization, did you watch the Olympics opening ceremony?
No, I didn't. I didn't. Thankfully, I was
Yeah, I
probably
was.
clipping my toenails or something.
So, real talk, my wife is the biggest Olympics fan in the world.
Mm.
She loves the Olympics. Ever since we started dating every 2 years, because it's not just the summer games. She loves the winter games. She will watch the Olympics every day for the entire 2 weeks.
Hmm.
She loves the Olympics. She loves the fanfare. She loves the. So, yeah, that night we made a French dinner with eclairs and French onion soup and all sorts of stuff. And we were posted up in front of the TV to watch the opening ceremony because
Hmm.
that's what we've done every 2 years since we've dated.
Yeah.
um, and what we saw on the TV was an opening ceremony that moved through the city of Paris and had all these different French, icons and imagery, and allusions to the Phantom of the Opera and allusions to this and that and the other. And there was one segment that was a catwalk, and that catwalk was supposed to represent like fashion in Paris. And so surrounding the catwalk, there were fashion models, drag queens, and a transgender model. So that's what we saw on American TV.
Hmm.
We didn't think that it was anything. I mean, we're kind of like, I mean, this whole ceremony, this whole opening ceremony was very, very, very gay. Like lots of, I mean, just to be honest, like
Hmm.
tons of homosexual and transgender and queer, I mean, like a lot of that stuff, right? So
Hmm.
we put the kids to bed. It was just Jenny and I watching it. I've been to Paris twice. Like, you kind of know what you're getting in. Like, Paris is a very, very godless city.
Hmm.
It just is. So, um, somewhere in the middle of the ceremony, my dad burst out of the room of this house we're staying in and had his phone, and he shoved his phone in my face, and there was one of his Facebook friends in all caps telling everybody to boycott the Olympics, not having to do with it. They're mocking Jesus and all this stuff. And Dad's like, "Are you guys watching this?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're not seeing what you're telling us we should be seeing." Um, so it kind of seems like we didn't see as Americans on our Olympic coverage everything that there was related to that scene in the opening ceremonies. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then when I saw what other people had seen or screenshotted or whatever, I went, "Oh, okay. I can kind of see why other people would be kind of like concerned about it, right?"
Yeah.
So, if you don't know what we're talking about, this is from Reuters News. I'll just read it. Paris 2024 organizers apologized on Sunday to Catholics and other Christian groups angered by a kitsch tableau in the Olympic Games opening ceremony that appeared to parody Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper painting. The segment, which resembled the biblical scene of Jesus Christ and his apostles sharing a last meal before crucifixion, featured drag queens, a transgendered model, and a naked singer made up as the Greek god of wine Dionysus. It drew dismay from the Catholic Church and the religious right in America. Clearly, there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. The opening ceremony tried to celebrate community tolerance, Paris 2024 spokesperson Anne Decamps told a press conference. We believe this ambition was achieved. If people have taken any offense, we are really sorry. The International Olympic Committee said it took note of Paris 2024's clarification. Thomas Jolly, the artistic director behind the flamboyant opening ceremony, said the scene had not been inspired by the Last Supper and instead depicted a pagan feast linked to the gods of Olympus. Jolly said on Saturday religious subversion had never been his intention. We wanted to talk about diversity. Diversity means being together. We wanted to include everyone, as simple as that, he told reporters on Saturday.
Hmm.
So, Gabe, you didn't watch it, but you saw screenshots from it, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Do you buy it? Do you think that this was specifically meant to mock and target Christianity, or do you buy the artistic director's clarification and halfway apology?
I don't know. I'm looking at it and it's like, if it wasn't intentional, it was definitely poor judgment.
Yeah.
Like I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but there are just so many similarities. It's hard to think that someone didn't stand back and look and be like, this looks like a lot like Da Vinci's Last Supper painting.
Right.
Um, Surely it occurred to someone, um, but I guess, uh, yeah. The other thing that was interesting was the whole blue man's genitals hanging out,
Yeah. That's what I found
and
more offensive. And I will say this,
like
unless
children around and stuff. Like, yeah.
yeah, unless I missed it, and I don't think I did because we were watching the whole thing. That was the part we didn't see on our TVs with the U.S. coverage.
Mhm.
That that was that was intentionally, I think, left out because of the
Yeah.
fact that U.S. people would go crazy.
No,
Um,
I would say that it's I think it's a subtle mockery of
mhm,
traditional Christian values
right.
via Da Vinci's Last Supper, which, I mean, and here's the thing is you can't get your knickers too much in a wad over that, because first of all, Da Vinci's painting of the Last
It's
Supper
not biblical.
is horribly unbiblical.
Right.
And and I mean, you can't get your knickers too much in a wad, because we're told by Christ that we would be mocked, that we would be
Right.
lied about, that we, that we would be persecuted. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's par for the course this day and age.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've gone back and forth on this for a long time because the night it happened and like all these people were outraged, I was like, give me a break.
Hmm.
Like I had all these people texting me and I just texted them back and I was like, hey, look, I'm watching. I don't see what you're seeing. Like I don't
Hmm.
see it, man. I watched this live in real time and it was only after it was over that I had people who hadn't watched it. They'd just been on Twitter sending me messages about how awful it was. And so I was kind of like frustrated that night. I was just like, this is so stupid. Like, I can't believe. And then later, as I started researching it and studying it and looking into the things that weren't shown on the US side of it, that's when I was like,
Hmm.
okay, yeah, that kind of did seem like it was at least taking some shots at Catholicism. Like, because like
Yeah.
you said, I mean, Da Vinci's painting's not biblically accurate, um, but it makes sense if you think about France right now. They are a like post-Christian nation
Hmm.
that essentially is declaring war on the Catholic Church, which the Catholic Church was the state religion for a very long time, and
Hmm.
they're now basically saying like that's silly, that's ridiculous. Like the new gods of France are tolerance, diversity, freedom, sexual liberation without any boundaries, that kind of thing, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so that seems to be more the subtext behind it, um, kind of a return to um, pre-Christian paganism as a middle finger to France's Christian past.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of that pendulum swing. Yeah. But, and we have to remember too that, like, the history of the Olympics is
Yes.
a very pagan one.
Right.
Um, so it would have been as much of a religious ceremony as much as an athletic
Mhm.
festival,
Right.
that would have been held in Greece,
Right.
um, and
In the nude,
actually,
by the way.
yeah, at the sanctuary of Zeus.
Right.
So there's nothing new under the sun, right? And so
Mhm.
it just, as all these nations of the world are coming together, they're going to celebrate things that are of our carnal nature,
Right.
and there's going to be a spiritual and religious aspect to them, as
Mhm.
that reupholstering of the modernity that we've reupholstered with is beginning to kind of wear off. I
Right.
think you'll see more and more people celebrating sexual licentiousness and, you
Mhm.
know, nudity and everything else.
Right.
Um, gosh, I mean, pedophilia was a thing back
Sure.
then. I mean,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
sadly probably going to, in our lifetime, become semi normalized.
Yeah. I think it
God
was.
forbid. But, and I'm not saying the Olympics are a gateway to all that, but
No.
I
No.
am
No. No.
saying
No.
that
I
you
know
have
what
to
you're saying.
remember
Yeah.
that if that if we really want to go back to the OG Olympics,
Right.
uh, then yeah, this is
Yeah.
yeah, part of that is
Is that what you would say to Christians outraged by this? Like, what did you expect? Did you expect this to be like a Christian event? I mean,
um I would say don't don't be so surprised when
right,
um biblical values are mocked,
right.
and mocked in a really lousy way. Like,
Well,
yeah.
here's the deal. I think Christians in Europe, they're used to that.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
saddens them, it hurts them, it disappoints them,
Yeah, perhaps.
but they're used to it, right? I don't think in America we understand and know what it looks like to be on the fringes, mocked and ridiculed and making fun of.
Yeah.
And instead of us like praying for those who curse us, we don't know how to do that.
Mm.
What we want to do is power up and either cancel them or demand an apology, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like we're still kind of thinking, oh, we're going to win the culture wars in France. It's like, man, culture war has been over in France for a long time. Like
Mm-hmm.
cultural Christianity is dead and gone, but the
Mm.
church is the church is still alive because there's still genuine followers of Jesus over there that are on the margins, and they're
Yeah.
on the fringes, and we pray for them and support them. But I don't think we're used to that. But I think that like in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to have to get used to that because we're going to get mocked even more.
Yeah. And I don't I hope people don't hear me when I say don't get your knickers in a wad over being mocked. I hope you don't also hear me saying that you should be abdicating your role and responsibility to be engaged in the
Sure,
local and national politics.
sure,
Continue to be engaged in that, continue to exercise
right.
influence and power in that way as long as we have it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I believe that our nation should have righteous laws that are built
Oh,
upon the
I don't
precepts of
want
the
to.
Bible.
I don't want to see America turn into that.
Yeah, we shouldn't. So in other
I
words,
don't
like
want to see that.
we
Yeah,
don't want to just like,
yeah,
roll over and just, okay, fine, let's have it the way that Europe
right,
is right now. Like,
right.
I'm not
No,
saying
no, no,
that, but
no, not at all.
yeah, continue to stand up and vote and influence and share the gospel with people around you and
Yeah,
influence culture around you.
yeah. But
But
here's the
don't,
deal: what
yeah.
we have to lose if we don't start living out our faith is that that's going to be us.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah.
if we're not actually like living by the principles found in the Word of God and
Hmm.
letting the standard of biblical morality be something that shapes us first, and then as it shapes us, then it shapes our communities. Man, that's the direction we're headed.
Hmm.
And you remove any standard for biblical morality, it turns into that. It turns into chaos. It turns into debauchery.
Hmm.
It turns into celebrating pure evil and calling what's evil good.
Hmm.
Um, so, Gabe, there are 200 countries that are being represented by 10,000 athletes at the
Hmm.
Olympic Games this summer. Is it right to lump them all together as somehow being complicit in this and demanding that all Christians boycott the games?
Hmm. No, I think I'm not ready to stand up and tell people to boycott the Olympics. I think every family needs to make up their minds on that, one way or the other. But um, I think you need to make your own educated decision on that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with Disney,
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I don't do anything Disney, but I know people in our congregation do. I need to exercise grace with them because they don't do like I do, and that's okay. Um, yeah, I think everyone just needs to make their own minds up and move forward with how they feel about it. Um, I will say that people need to exercise caution if
Of
this
course.
is going to be continually pumped into our homes and in our living rooms. It might be a good opportunity for you to pause the TV or whatever you can do,
Mm-hmm.
or in a commercial break, say, okay, kids, what you just saw was a mockery of our faith.
Right.
What do we do in this situation when we are mocked and our faith is mocked? Do
Yeah.
we get angry? Do we become violent? Do we ridicule or belittle people? Or do we pray for them?
Mm.
It might be a good opportunity to talk about that
Yeah.
and not just let it be normalized in your home. Um,
Absolutely.
so, yeah, it's a tough
Yeah.
question, though. Tough situation.
Yeah. I think where I'm at with it is the organizers of the opening ceremony are ideologically in a completely different space than
Mm-hmm.
the athletes.
The athletes, yeah. Oh, yeah,
You know what I
certainly.
mean?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I mean, I don't think that, like I watched the women's triathlon today
Mm-hmm.
because I have done a couple triathlons and I
Mm-hmm.
love the triathlon. I think it's an amazing distance. I can almost guarantee you those ladies who had trained their entire lives to be there weren't somehow
Mm-hmm.
ideologically supporting
Mm-hmm.
what was some sort of sideswipe mockery of the Christian faith just by
Yeah.
being there and competing on the world stage. I don't. I think that's a bit of a stretch, right?
Yeah.
And I don't feel like me tuning in and watching a triathlon today was somehow me saying it's all right and I'm supporting you, France, for mocking the Christian faith. I don't think that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, I do think with any media we watch, we can't just consume it wholesale. We have to have discernment.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be willing to make sure that our allegiance to Jesus comes before our allegiance to being entertained.
Yeah.
And if anything, gosh, if you're watching the NFL and something comes across your TV screen that's incompatible with the Christian faith, you got to know your allegiance to Jesus comes before your allegiance to being entertained by football, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. I'm always big on inoculation over isolation.
yes,
Um, you're just not going to escape this world, this Babylon that we're living in.
mm-hmm. That's a good
Your
word for it.
kids are going to be exposed to it. It will find your kids. You might as well, while they're living in your home, do your best to inoculate them to it,
Yeah,
so that they have those spiritual antibodies in their system and can fight it off
right.
and combat it. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but I mean, there's a limit to that. Obviously, you don't want to expose them to anything and everything, of course.
Yeah,
But
well, my kids didn't watch that part of the opening ceremony. I mean, when
yeah,
my dad came out and kind of warned us that was coming down the pike, we were kind of like, okay,
mm,
we'll put the kids to bed and then we'll watch carefully with our finger over the fast forward button. And
mm-hmm.
we, like I said earlier, we never saw what it is that we were warned of until later when people started sending us screenshots. We're like, okay, we didn't see it on our end, but if that's what that was, then that's not good, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I also will say this: I feel like we as Christians need to make sure that we are honest and we don't exaggerate or
Mm-hmm.
sensationalize things that may not be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, and discredit ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Last time I checked, dishonesty and exaggeration and sensationalism, that's like a sin. That's not right. And so us doing that, us basically filling in unclear gaps
Mm-hmm.
with, oh, I know exactly what that is, or look at it, and like that's not good, man. Like at the end of the day, it's like what I read in Romans this morning about whatever doesn't proceed from faith is a sin. So if your conscience bothers you in watching the Olympics, for heaven's sake, don't watch the Olympics, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a Christian friend of yours that their conscience doesn't bother them to watch the Olympics, Romans 14 that I read this morning says,
Leave them
who
alone.
made you their judge?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you their savior? You're their Lord. They have one Lord. It's not you.
Yeah.
Like their conscience doesn't bother them. That's not a
Mind your own
black and
business.
white commandment. So
Yeah.
we got to choose to be a little bit more spiritually mature with these sorts of things than just demanding a boycott just because we
Mm-hmm.
were offended, right? So,
Mm.
yeah. I love hearing lists of things I'm supposed to boycott from people. Don't you love that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there might be a time and place for that sometimes, but maybe that's a good episode. When to boycott, when not to boycott.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. It's interesting. So many of the people that were so heated about certain things that you had to boycott always went back on them, even though nothing changed. It was just
Yeah.
like the when it stopped being the trendy thing to do, and you stopped.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't virtue signal anymore for why I should boycott it. Like when that died down, they always went back to drinking Starbucks, or always went back to shopping at Target or whatever.
That one spot at Target, man, it's got a hold on
Yeah,
you.
man.
Yeah.
So, like, did you really boycott that because you felt a conviction, or because you wanted to virtue signal and tell everybody how big of a patriot you were, or whatever the case may be? It's just silly to me.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you're
You
convicted, genuine, if you're convicted, genuinely, follow through, do it.
Yeah,
and I respect you for that.
Absolutely.
But if it's just you, the fervor of the moment, getting swept into it, and you're just doing it so everybody thinks you're a good Christian, then I don't have any respect for you because you're not doing it for the right reasons. So, but anyway.
Yo, shots fired.
Shots fired. I'm getting sassy. We should probably sign off before we.
It's our bedtime. Yeah,
it is our bedtime. Yeah.
Good talk though.
It was a good talk, man. It's been too long. We had a lot of catching up to do. So, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, send us an email. There's a BiblePodcast@gmail.com. And you guys have been a little lax on the Bible questions. Come on, man. Come on. Well,
Maybe we answered them all.
Few weeks. Maybe we answered every Bible question that's ever been sent to us. But yeah, send us a Bible question. We love them. We need them. And you know where to send them. We'll see you guys next time.